الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, inshallah, we'll continue in our series, The Fiqh of Marriage, a concise summary. So in the second lesson today, inshallah, we're going to cover the qualities of a good spouse. The qualities of a good spouse for both the male and the female, both the bride and the groom. What qualities do a potential wife, qualities should she possess and embody? What qualities should a potential husband have? And this is by no means an exhaustive list, but what we're trying to do, inshallah, is that since last week's lesson we spoke about the importance of marriage, its ruling, its wisdom, and also its importance. Now we want to get into the person who's prepared to get married. What should they be looking for in their potential partner? And this is a very important topic. So I'm going to say from the get-go, if its lesson's a little bit longer, then I apologize in advance. But I try my best to be as thorough as possible. I'm trying to combine between what the Quran and Sunnah bring and what our ulama have advised. And so it's very important to pay attention, inshallah. So when a person is ready to get married now, it's time for them to look for a suitable match. And each spouse should be looking for a partner who exemplifies excellent character, religious practice, responsibility, care, concern, etc. But what are those qualities that you should be looking for? So there's a list for the male, for the women to have for their potential husband, and a list for the husband to look for his potential wife. We'll begin, inshallah, with the qualities that the Quran and Sunnah mention that a righteous wife should have. And the reason that we're mentioning these qualities in this lesson, it's not only for those who are embarking on the process of marriage, but even those who are already married, to see what kind of qualities should they be exemplifying within their marriage. And if they're not, then they can work towards. Because alhamdulillah, these sources are in the Quran and Sunnah, and they talk about what a righteous spouse should be like. So this is important. So if we look to the Quran and Sunnah, we see that there's 10 or more characteristics that a good or righteous wife should have. For the Quran and Sunnah, we can find 10 or more. I'm going to mention 10 or so good qualities that a righteous wife should have. 10. And inshallah, we'll mention them and we'll try to explain them as we go along. And for the husband, then there are 6 qualities. 6 qualities that could be found in the Quran and Sunnah in relation to a good potential husband. So 10 qualities or more. So in our lesson, we'll just mention 10 or so, because there's more, but we'll say just 10 for a potential wife, a righteous wife, and 6 qualities that a potential husband should have, or you should be looking for. So we'll begin with the qualities of a good wife. Number 1, that she be religious. That's the first one. And we're going to see in this series, for both the male and the female, righteousness is the most important one. That they be righteous. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 34, so righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding their husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. So in Surah An-Nisa, verse 34, Allah says, so righteous women are devoutly obedient. Allah describes them as being obedient, devout, guarding their husband's absence, i.e. whatever he has in his property, etc. And, of course, they are, right, first and foremost, pious to Allah. And it comes in the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, which we'll be citing a few times in this series, or this lesson today. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, a woman is married for 4 reasons. For her property, or you could say her wealth, her status, her beauty, and her religion. So try to marry, or upon you is to marry the religious one. May your hand be smeared with dust. Al-Bukhari wal Muslim. So here in this hadith, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he mentioned a number of qualities. He mentioned wealth, status, beauty, and religion. And we're going to explain each one separately, so don't worry. That shahid, the point of reference in this one, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam encouraged us to marry the religious wife, the religious woman. And then he made dua, may your hand be smeared or be covered with dust. And we'll explain what that means. Tayyib, so right now we see in the Quran and Sunnah, a righteous wife and religiosity is one of the most important qualities. What does this hadith mean? A lot of people, when they read this hadith, they wonder, what does it mean that a woman is married for 4? Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, died 676 Hijri. Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, writes in Riyadh al-Salihin, page 172, that the meaning is that the people customarily, the meaning of the hadith, is that people customarily intend to marry a woman for these 4 qualities. So be eager to marry one who is religious, i.e. hasten to her and be eager for her companionship. So Imam Nawawi rahimahullah is telling us here that people generally, i.e. men customarily look for these 4 qualities in a woman. But what Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us is to look for and to be eager for the wife who is righteous. This is what the hadith is telling us. As for the other qualities, they're not negated, as they're not bad things. But we see if we want to prioritize, then it's religion over the rest, as will come later. What does the last part of this hadith mean? A lot of people, when they read this hadith, may your hand be covered in dust. Or for riwayah, one version says, may your right hand be covered in dust. This, the ulama have differed over. They differed over its meaning. And one of the meanings which I'll present, and will help to establish a point that I mentioned last week, is that it's a dua for the husband, or for the seeker of marriage, not a dua against. Some of the scholars said it's a dua against the one who decides not to marry a religious wife. Or some said it's a dua for. Some say it's just a khabar, just a report. It doesn't literally mean. But Imam al-Mundhiri, I want you to pay attention to this. Imam al-Mundhiri, who died 656 Hijri. Imam al-Mundhiri, the author of Targhib wa Tarhib, one of the best books, if not the best book, on the subject of righteous and virtuous actions. He writes in At-Targhib wa Tarhib, volume 4, page 116, that the meaning of may your hand be covered in dust is a word that shares more than one meaning. Its meaning is an encouragement and an enticement. It was said that it's a supplication for poverty. Some ulama say it means, if you don't choose a wife who is righteous, may your hand be covered in dust, i.e. faqr, may you be poor. Another group, ulama said, means a lot of wealth. And the word that shares more than one meaning can accept both meanings. And he's saying it has possibility of carrying both. Then he says, what is more apparent to me, he says, what's more apparent is the latter meaning. That may your hand be covered in dust means, do not turn away from marrying a righteous woman. May Allah increase your wealth. May Allah increase your wealth. Then, this point from Imam al-Mundhiri, rahimahullah, strengthens what I mentioned last week. That the one who is not wealthy and wishes to get married, if they get married for Allah's sake, and they marry a righteous wife, inshallah, Allah will increase them in wealth. It's from the means of provisions. Allahu Akbar. And so that's more of an enticement and encouragement. Because if someone would say, why would someone want to marry a righteous wife? Well, there's so much benefit. But if someone were just to look at this aspect, it's from the asbab, inshallah, from the means to gaining provisions. So, like I mentioned last week, if a husband is poor and he marries a wife who is righteous, for Allah's sake, then inshallah it's a means to gaining provisions. So that is encouraging for the husband to look for the righteous wife. But if we look to the Quran and Sunnah as well, we find that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam encouraged a man to marry a righteous woman because she brings about much, much benefit. Just 3 benefits from a righteous wife. Number 1, one hadith says that a righteous wife is a source of happiness. As it comes in the hadith, Shaykh Al-Albani authenticated in Silsila Ahadith al-Sahiha, number 282. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that 4 things are from happiness, and one of them is a righteous wife. So a righteous wife is a means of happiness. And so that's another benefit. It brings happiness to the spouse, to the husband. Hadith fi Sahiha, number 282. Number 2, she, the righteous wife, helps the husband in the worldly affairs. She assists him in the the affairs of the dunya, whether it be child rearing, whether it be take care of the house, whether it be advising him, whether it be looking out for him. And that's a great bonus as well. Again, Hadith is Sahiha, Hadith number 2176. And the Nabi ﷺ said that the righteous wife is the one who helps her husband in the affairs of the dunya and the akhirah. And that's the last one, number 3, that she assists him in the umur, in the affairs, amr al-akhirah, the affairs of the akhirah, which means she helps him in reminding him to pray salah, to fast Ramadan, to be able to do all these different ibadat, and they participate and they cooperate one another in that. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. As Allah says, cooperate in righteousness and piety. That hadith, last one, is the same hadith earlier, as-Sahiha 2176. So I just mentioned them by number so someone can go back and take a look, because we have a lot of material to cover. Inshallah, we will move. So all those benefits of the righteous wife and more. So it's invaluable. The husband has to look for the righteous wife. It's invaluable. He cannot, in reality, put a value on that. She is the most important thing that he could obtain. And also means he can find. Because if he can find a righteous wife, it helps his life tremendously. With that being said, some people may ask the question, what does it mean to be righteous? So inshallah, take this down. When it comes to the husband and the wife, righteousness is important. Lakin, what is the dabit? What is the correct rule when it comes to religiosity? In my opinion, or your opinion, or someone else's opinion, one person could be religious or not religious. We all could differ. Faida, Shaykhana Ibn Uthaymin, rahimahullah, he mentions, and he was asked this very question. He was asked, the Shaykh, what is the rule when it comes to righteousness, i.e. deen? Because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, marry the righteous one, or the religious one. What's that mean? So brothers and sisters, take this down. He says, rahimahullah, religion means performing the commandments of Allah and avoiding the prohibitions. If a man knows a woman, or a woman knows a man, who performs what Allah commanded and leaves off what is prohibited, i.e. Allah prohibits, then this person is religious. That person is religious. So this is the basic standard. Are they doing the awamir, yani the commandments of Allah? Are they staying away from the nawahi, the prohibitions? If so, that is the definition of taqwa. And he says this is Shaykh in his Sharh Zad al-Mustaqni' volume, tape number 1, side A. Sharh Zad. This is later on became a Sharh al-Mumti', but this is the audios of this book. So this definition of the Shaykh teaches us the bare minimum standard is somebody who's doing the commandments and stays away from the prohibitions. But some of us, we all know, or we all would agree, that somebody, depending on how religious they are, they will look for someone at that level or higher. So obviously, if somebody is more religious than that, i.e. they do not just the wajibat, but they do the mustahabbat, and they do talab al-ilm, and they do all these other things, then it's also important to try to find someone who is compatible to your level, or you are pleased with their religion. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong to marry somebody who is not as religious perhaps as you. But what we do know is what does it mean to be religious. It's sad to say, many people, as the mashayikh, they complain and they themselves advise, they don't ask about religiosity to begin with. And that then leads them to think religious person is that they don't do the kaba'ir maybe. That's it. Some other things they do wrong. Or they don't do very much, but they have good manners. We're going to talk about the categorization, but religion number one. There's no doubt on this. So that's a helpful tool to use to measure. But if someone is higher level, then there's no harm in them looking for someone at their level. And because it's a preference, and preferences are permissible. Important note. Some people attempt to marry a spouse who is not practicing with the intention, or maybe they are practicing, but their faith is weak, with the intention of changing them. Is this something good to do? You hear a lot of brothers or sisters say, I'm going to marry so-and-so, and I'm going to change them. I'm going to make them more righteous. Or, they're not practicing, and I'm going to lead them to guidance. Firstly, the ulama, they have more than one opinion on this practice. For example, our Shaykh Abdul Muhsin Abbad al-Badr, hafidhullah ta'ala, in Sharh Sunan Abi Dawood, tape number 236, he was asked the same question and he said, "It's la ba's bidalik." There's no harm in that, provided the person who you're trying to help, i.e. to improve the religion, is not already engaging in fawahish, open sins like adultery and fornication and the likes. So he mentioned that if it's possible someone can do that, then there is no harm in it. But our Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah was very strict, and he advised not to do that. Because he said the reality is, often people who say they want to do this, they do not succeed. And he mentions again in the same tape, Sharh Zad, Kitab al-Nikah, tape 1, side A. And I want to read word for word what he said. He said, some people say, I will marry a woman who is not practicing, perhaps Allah will guide them through my hands, or at my hands. The Shaykh says, we are not responsible for the future. We don't know the future. And perhaps you marry her wanting Allah to guide her at your hands, however she turns you towards what she's upon. So you become miserable at her hands. And likewise the opposite. Some women are proposed to by men who are not even practicing. However, they say Allah will guide them through my hands, or their hands. Worse than that, he says, is that they might know, or it might be known that this person doesn't even pray. However, they say Allah will guide him through our hands. We say we are not responsible for the future. The knowledge of the future is with Allah. What we are responsible for is the reality and present. So we say that this man whom you assume will be guided or become upright, perhaps he will corrupt you and your children and misguide them. And this is because a man has dominance over a woman in the marriage. He's the head of the household. How many practicing women married a person thinking he was righteous or religious? Then it became clear he was not religious. So she became fatigued and exhausted greatly because of him. And perhaps he looks apparently religious, however internally he's a fasiq, a wicked doer, so she becomes fatigued and exhausted greatly. So this advice of the Shaykh rahimahullah is an advice invaluable. That today, in our time, this kind of argument is not something we should be thinking. Look for what you want and go for that which the deen teaches us. Because if the standard is that they do the commandments and stay away from the prohibitions, that's your standard then. But to assume that everyone I'm going to guide them, then the reality tells a different story. If anyone wants to know more, they can take a look at some of the stories of the past, like the story of Imran Mihtan, who he married a woman who was from the Kharijites, right, min Khawarij, and she ended up misguiding him and taking him away from the Sunnah towards the Aqidah of the Khawarij. And this story the ulama relate many times to warn against even the practice of marrying people who are misguided or upon serious, as we see here, serious misguidance and innovation. And of course, it also goes without saying that if somebody wants a higher standard, or they have something in mind which they consider to be a level they want, then there's no harm to go for that. But this practice, as Shaykh was saying, even though some scholars say it's permissible, if someone could know that it's going to be possible, or there's a high likelihood, there's no benefit in trying to risk something, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us, marry the one who is religious, may Allah cover your dust, may your hand be covered in dust. Quality number 2, that a wife should have good manners. In the same hadith I recited earlier, hadith Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, there's a different version of that hadith from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. And in that version, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam continues and he says, a woman is married for one of the following characteristics, and he mentions her beauty, her wealth, her character, and her religion. So upon you is the woman of religion and character. This is a sahih ziyada, religion and character. May your hand be covered in dust. Shaykh Albani authenticated the hadith in Sahih al-Targhib, hadith 1919. So here we have the addition of an khuluq, and this is originally found in Muslim Imam Ahmad. So authentic ziyada that shows that a woman should be married for her good qualities. And this is very important. It means if a woman doesn't have good character, then it's not a woman someone should go forward to marry. Why? Because a woman who has bad character, it can damaging towards the husband and towards her own self by these bad manners. There comes the one hadith from Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. It's a longer hadith. In the middle of that hadith, I want everyone to pay attention to this. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, amongst the sources of misery are an evil wife who dismays you when you look at her, who uses her tongue against you, and who, when you are away from her, you will not trust her in regard to herself or her property. Subhanallah al-Azim. Hadith Silsila Hadith Sahih number 282. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned this is one of the a woman who is of bad character, is a woman who is a source of misery. Just like the righteous woman is a source of happiness, this is also true. So it's very important for the husband to look for the wife who has the best manners, but also for the spouses to try their best, i.e. the women, if they have certain qualities, like the men will have as well, as we all have actually, qualities we need to work on, that we fix our qualities and characteristics, because this is what the deen calls us to have good character. And good character is from the deen. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was praised in the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Verily you are upon high lofty manners. So the good manners of a woman is very important, just like for the man. Just as, and it will come next soon. So that's a second quality, good manners. Very important, good manners. Thirdly, that she comes from a good family. Here, the ulama, they mention this as a benefit. That a woman, it's preferable that she come from a good household, i.e. a righteous household, because that would have an impact on the religiosity and righteousness of the woman. With dalil, and what's the proof? Pay attention to this. Allah says in Surah Maryam, verse 28, when Maryam alayhi salam, she came with Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam to the people, they said, "Oh, sister of Harun." Not Musa's brother literally, but there's more than one opinion, but the opinion is that it was another righteous man at that time who was named Harun. So they say, "Oh, sister of Harun, your father was not a man who used to commit adultery, nor was your mother unchaste woman." Chapter 19, verse 28. This is what they said to her when they saw her carrying a child and assumed that, that she did something haram. What's the point of this ayah? Where's the istidlal or the shahid? Imam al-Khattabi, rahimahullah, died 388 Hijri. Well, Imam al-Munawi, 1038 Hijri. Both of them, they say. Both of them extracted from this verse. That it shows that people of Maryam judged her righteousness by the righteousness of her parents. Since her parents were not known for any filth, they could not fathom that Maryam would do such a thing. Which is obviously not true. She didn't do anything. But the idea is, look at the way that they were arguing, the rationale they had. And then Al-Khattabi and Munawi, they both say, and Allah didn't criticize her people for thinking this way. I.e., this logic that they had, that the righteous asl, i.e. parents, affects the fara', the branches, i.e. the parents, affect the children, is correct thinking. And this is found in Ma'alim al-Sunan, volume 3, page 73 to 74, and Faisal Qaadir of Munawi, volume 6, page 364. So this is a very powerful benefit. That a righteous parents and family have a tremendous benefit. And it's an encouragement for the spouses to be righteous. Encouragement for the spouses to be righteous. Because the spouses themselves benefit others by their own religiosity, i.e., if the husband and wife are righteous, they benefit their children. And from there, the cycle continues. So very important, the heavy importance to having or coming from a good family, if possible. But again, some of us will be asked the question, brother, what if I don't come from a good family? I'm the only religious one. Or someone may say, what about if somebody's family are non-Muslim, that they are revert? Okay, follow me, I'm going to explain. But before that, there's a hadith. Some scholars differ on authenticity. Imam al-Albani, he authenticated fi Sahih 1067, where Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, choose the best for your seed. Literally it means, talking to the man, choose the best for your seed. I.e., seed here means, right, it's an analogy for birth and children. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, he's saying here what means, be careful who you marry, who you choose to marry, from what family or woman you're going to marry. This hadith, some scholars weaken it, and it's like some others, like Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, authenticated it. But what's the meaning of the hadith? Shaykh Al-Albani in Silsila Huda wa Nur, tape 1046, he says, that is, if a Muslim marries from a household which is not honorable, from a household whose family is known for bad manners, not easily be agreeable or tolerant, then that will be a direct impact, or have a direct impact on the marriage, because things will go back to the origin. And this is what we see today in our society when we talk about upbringing, how were you raised and what family you came from, etc. Tayyib? So this is a recommendation the ulama, they mention. A recommendation that if somebody comes, you're going to find a spouse, a man is looking for a wife, if she comes from a righteous family, inshallah, it's a good sign. But like I said, some people will be in a situation where maybe they're righteous, i.e. the woman is righteous, and her siblings or her family may not be as righteous. What about this situation? Then here we should know, then the ulama only mention this by way of recommendation. It's not binding. Nor does it affect the the validity of the marriage. And the reason is that reverts who come to the faith, they should always be remembered that the Sahabatul Kiram radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, all of them were reverts. They all came to Islam. And they before that were in Jahiliyyah. And that meant that when they came to Islam, many of their families were not practicing. Yet they didn't stop any of them from getting married, nor was an issue posed. Number one. Number two, some of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, at the time that he married them, their families were not practicing, some of them. Like Habiba, the daughter of Abu Sufyan, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. May Allah be pleased with both of them. Habiba came to Islam before Abu Sufyan. So she was married to Rasul ﷺ. And Abu Sufyan came to Islam after. But that didn't stop Rasul ﷺ from marrying Habiba, even though her father was the enemy at that time of the da'wah. Also, we find that the Rasul ﷺ married Safiya bin Huyay, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, al-Mu'mineen. And she, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, came from a Jewish background. And that did not stop Nabi ﷺ from marrying her. So we see from this, the ulama only recommend this. It's not something to say that is a must. So it's very important not to take this to be something like a standard or non-negotiable. Rather, it's something which they say perhaps is a good sign. Along with this, interestingly, I should mention, Imam al-Hajjawi, rahimahullah, this one from the scholars of the Hanabila, Imam al-Hajjawi died 968 Hijri. He mentions in his kitab, Zad al-Mustaqni', that it's recommended to marry a wife or woman, this is for the brothers, it's recommended to marry a woman who doesn't have a mother. Now, where did he get this or this rationale? What he means by this is that if someone marries a woman who doesn't have a mother, there won't be any problems with the mother-in-law. But Shaykh Uthaymeen rahimahullah in Sharh Zad, he says this is not correct. Because the da'if opinion, he says. Because while it's possible that the person who married a woman who has no mother, he may be safe from the mother-in-law, he has a mother-in-law and she's not safe from her. Number one. Number two, mothers usually help the marriage. He says this is a good benefit. He says most mothers, they're not against the marriage. They're the ones who support and aid. So that's not something true, to be honest. On top of that, the wife, she might have daughters from a previous marriage, or she has sisters, others and aunts, and they too could be a source of problems. So this point altogether is not something correct, just something interesting. Because if you read the matan, you're going to see it mentions bila yani recommended for a man to marry a woman without a mother. So I found that to be interesting. But like I said, it's not something to consider. طيب, number 4, that she is a virgin. And this, the ulama, they mention most of them in their books. بدليل حديث جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله تعالى عنهما in Bukhari 4052, Sahih al-Bukhari hadith 4052, and other hadith. Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu anhuma got married. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, have you got married, O Jabir? And he said yes. And he asked alayhi salatu wasalam, was she a virgin or a matron? Yani a woman who was married prior. He said no, a woman who was married prior. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, why did you not marry a young girl who you could have fun with or play with, i.e. literally fondle with? This is what the word means. And the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he said this, Jabir gave the excuse and answer that, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, my father was martyred on the day of Uhud, and he left behind 9 daughters who are my 9 sisters. And I dislike to marry another young girl who is of their age or so. Rather, I needed a woman older who can help me combing their hair and looking after them. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he heard this, he said, you have done the right thing. And this is a very good benefit. A number of benefits we take from the hadith Jabir. But what we take from this, Rasulullah encouraged the marrying of a virgin over the one who's a thayyib, the one who was previously married. Now, this recommendation is explained from other hadith. Many people, when they read this, they don't understand this and may think that, how could this be so when the Rasulullah married mostly those who were previously married? Alright, so inshallah, I'm going to answer that question. But before we get there, we have to accept the hadith as they are. Some people, when they read these things, they don't make jama' adillah, gather all the evidences. There's no contradiction. When Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in another hadith, reported in Ibn Majah and others, in As-Sahih, Shaykh Al-Albani authenticated it, hadith 623, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you should marry virgins. Why? Because they have sweeter mouths, which means they have better speech, i.e. more sweet language. their wombs are more prolific and fertile because they were not married before, and they are satisfied with less, i.e. they are more content with less to the material dunya. So 3 qualities: sweeter speech, which means good language, right? It means they're more kind, or maybe more, right? Their words are more attractive to the husband. Number 2, more that they're perhaps more childbearing, more prolific, more fertile. And lastly, easy to please compared to the thayyib, because she's already previously married, so perhaps she already has a standard of living she's used to. Not to mention, the ulama also add that many times the wife who was previously married has a standard. She understands, and she might even be attached to her previous husband. As it comes to Hadith Bukhari about one wife and husband who had an argument or went to Rasulullah ﷺ, and the first wife, or the wife, was still attached to his first husband. So this is a reality. And this was explained. These reasons are in the hadith. And for more, you can read the kutub of explanation of these hadith, the shuruhat, like Faisal Ibn Abdul, volume 4, page 236. Tayyib. So the point is, the virgin is given preference. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying this. But someone will say, but how about his actions? Before we get to his actions, take a look at another hadith. When Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she asked him herself, O Messenger of Allah, suppose you have land in a valley where there is a tree of which something has been eaten, and then you found trees which nothing has been eaten. Which of these 2 would you let your camels graze? Aisha is very clever. She gave a method, a parable. And what she's trying to say is, the garden where there are some trees where some fruit is be eaten is like a woman previously married, and the other one, no one has grazed, is like the woman who was never married before. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I will let my camels graze on the land which nothing has been eaten from. And so here Rasulullah is confirming to Aisha that he would marry a virgin over a thayyib. And so some people now, going back to the question, if Rasulullah said this, but his actions show that he married mostly those who are previously married, how do you reconcile this? So the first thing we have to know is that when it comes to usul, going back to our usul and qawaid, the statements of Rasulullah take precedence over his actions. Sunnatul qawliya, they go above Sunnatul fi'liya. So Nabi Sallallahu words are in our Sharia heavier for us than his actions, according to usuliyun, because the actions of Rasulullah sometimes may be more specific to him than his statements. That's just general. So here he's saying that he would. And he did marry Aisha, who was a virgin, radiallahu ta'ala anha. But most of those who married weren't. So here, someone may ask this question, that why did Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say this? And we'll say that then his statements proceed over the actions. And it's not to say that thayyib will not get married. It doesn't mean that the previously married wife has no value. No one's saying that. And no one should ever understand that. But it's talking about preference and priority. And that's what Hafid ibn Hajar, died age 852 Hijri, Hafid ibn Hajar rahimahullah writes in Fath al-Bari, volume 9, page 23, that I prefer, what Rasulullah is saying to Aisha at the end of the hadith is, I prefer to choose that over other things, i.e., I prefer the virgin over the non-virgin. And what he means by this is that Ibn Hajar says there's no contradiction, because the reality is that he married mostly those who were non-virgins. So somebody may say then, how do you reconcile fully? So the answer is, as the ulama they mentioned, if somebody has a particular preference due to a need, or due to his circumstances, to marry a woman who was previously married, or a woman who is older, or a woman who has children, or whatever it may be, then for him choosing that woman at that time over a virgin is the right thing to do, as Jabir ibn Abdullah did, radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. So it's found in the Al-Fiqhiyya Al-Kuwaitiyya, volume 41, page 228, Al-Mawsu'a Al-Fiqhiyya Al-Kuwaitiyya, that tremendous fiqh reference. It says that the Shafi'i and the Hanabila, the Shafi'i madhab and the Hanbali madhab, have textual proof in their madhab that it's preferable to marry a woman who was previously married if there's more benefit for the individual at hand. And that is, for example, somebody who may not be, let's say, very capable, i.e. they're not looking for children, let's say, or let's say they're not as intimate, or or their desires are low compared to another person. That's one. Or that person has children, and he's looking for a woman who's older to help him, or previously married who can help him take care of the children. Or he has children and she has children, and the likes. If he has a reason, like Jabir ibn Abdullah did, then they say that is a more preferred opinion. And likewise, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen agreed in Al-Sharh al-Mumti', volume 5, page 124. He says if a person chooses a previously married woman for other purposes, i.e. particular to that person's situation, then that is better for him in that situation. So no one should be thinking that this is some kind of discrimination, rather it's preferences. And everyone is allowed to prefer that which they prefer. Now does that mean the woman who was previously married, who got divorced, can never get married again? No. Because it's from Islam as well to marry those women, and it's from the practice of the Sahabatul Kiram, starting with Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and it's a good thing as well. So no one's going to be left out. On top of this, someone may ask a better question, which is, why did Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam put so much preference on a virgin when she loses the virginity after the first night? That's actually an interesting question. Why? Why all this preference if she's going to eventually become a thayyib very soon? Imam Ibn Qayyim beautifully answered this in his Kitab Rawdat al-Muhibbeen. Page 245, he answers this question and says two reasons. And it shows you how the ulama, they ration and they gather and they think and they compile all these matters to make our lives easier. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them for their efforts. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah says, number one, because a virgin, since she did not have any intimacy before that with any other husband, then the intimacy will only be with her present husband who she marries. And this intimacy, i.e. that they have together, will make her love him more than anyone else. And so it will engender and foster love, and then from that love comes great treatment. Because she's the first and the only person, or he's the first and only person who was intimate with her. And that means that they're going to have a stronger relationship and bond. That's number one. And number two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the people of Jannah that the women, the Hur Ain, and the spouses of the men in Jannah, every time a man gets married to her, every time a man has intimacy with her, when he returns to her, she's again a virgin. As Allah tells us in the Quran, in Surah Al-Rahman, and Surah Al-Waqi'ah, and Surah Al-Naba, and other places. And of course, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah is mentioning this point to show you that there's a wisdom behind it. And preference, again we said, goes back to the person's situation. And so you can go back to the Kitab Rawdat al-Muhibbeen, which is a book, it's called The Garden of the Lovers, page 245, where Ibn Qayyim talks all about love in Islam, the permissible, the impermissible, the etiquettes, etc. Tayyib, moving along. Number 5, that a husband should look, I believe that was the word number 5. This one's number 5, I believe. Yes, this is number 5. That a husband should look for a spouse who is beautiful or attractive to him. And we know, as we say in English, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But this is something encouraged in Islam. And I'm going to say it now, but I'm going to get to it later. Beauty is for both parties. So it's not just for the husband to look for a good-looking wife. It's also for the wife to look for a good-looking husband. The hadith Abu Hurairah mentioned earlier is a proof. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said a woman is married for her beauty. Hafid ibn Hajar explains in Fath al-Bari, it is taken from this hadith, the hadith of Abu Hurairah I mentioned earlier, the recommendation to marry a beautiful woman, except if there's a conflict between marrying a beautiful non-religious woman and a practicing not-so-beautiful woman. Now prioritization. It's in that case a little bit different. What do you do? But in general, beautiful or attractive to the husband, this is something which Islam gives weight to. He says if they're equal in religion, then he goes for the one who he finds more beautiful to him, and is more deserving to marry her, because this will obviously help the relationship, and this is natural. He says connected to this is the beauty of essence. I want the brothers and sisters to pay attention, especially the brothers. He says connected to this is the jamal, the beauty of that, of the essence, of the soul, of the sifat, qualities. And also that a woman has a cheaper dowry. That's also a consideration to add to the good list of qualities. And I don't have time to mention this one, but we'll talk about it next week. What is the point he's saying here? Beauty, physical beauty, Islam is saying yes. But also connected, he said, is the other type of beauty, which is the beauty of qualities, of character, of the internal, external and internal. Fath al-Bari, volume 9, page 135. So many of the times, the brothers, if they're looking only for physically attractive and not others, it's a mistake. It's a big mistake. And that's because it's not going to fulfill the purpose, which is for the sake of Allah. That means deen first. From this hadith we take a number of benefits. That a man marrying a woman due to her, him being attracted to her, i.e. the beauty, this will create a stronger bond. And this is natural. And this goes for the woman as well. If someone she's attracted to, she sees to be beautiful or good looking. Contrary to what many people think, the scholars also advise that a woman marry a man who is like that. And we'll talk about the end. Second benefit, that beauty is from the angle of external and internal. It's not just external. And to clarify this point, Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, in his work, the Concise Manual on Marriage, he says there's two types of beauty. Beauty is of two types. Physical beauty, which is the appearance, like how she speaks, how she looks, all of this. And this will help, he says, foster the love and bond. Because Allah says in Surah Al-Rum, verse 21, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ. We always hear this verse. And the signs of Allah is that He created from your own self spouses, so you can find repose in them. And He placed between you love and affection, mercy and affection and mercy. Verily, in that are the signs, indeed signs for people who reflect. So, physical beauty is what the hadith earlier cited is telling us. But then the Shaykh says that connected is the figurative beauty, which is the religion and manners. And the woman, the more a woman is religious and well-mannered, the more beloved she is to the soul, and her better the outcome of the marriage. And it comes in the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said that the one who, when he was asked who is the best woman, he says the one who, when you see her, when you look at her, you become happy. You're happy with her appearance, attracted to her. Number two, obeys you when he commands her, i.e. that which is halal and that which is permissible for him to ask. And lastly, she does not go against his wishes with regards to herself and her wealth. i.e. she tries to work too hard to please him and do that which is preferable to him, the same way he will also try his best to be presentable and good to her. And so this hadith, Sahih Sunan Abi Dawud, hadith 32-31, shows you that there's two types of beauty. Now somebody may ask the question, what if somebody thinks they're not attractive? And this is a very common question people may ask or they fall into. They think, I'm not attractive. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But to emphasize something, for those people who may feel in that situation, that no one's going to marry them because they're not good looking, Imam Ibn Qayyim, he mentions, rahimahullah, that somebody, due to their internal beauty, good manners, good deen, good clean heart, they become more attractive to other people. And they become more beloved to other people. And they become more attractive to other people. Just because of that, even if they're externally not very good looking. But if they're more good looking, i.e. they perfected their character and manners. And he says this is something which is witnessed and tested and known. So this is a great encouragement for somebody who may be suffering from low self-esteem. Don't be fooled by those things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He grants everyone the best of forms. He created human beings for ahsan taqweem. And if someone works in beautifying their character and their manners and their behavior, that makes them more attractive. Kama qala Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. That's a great benefit. Number 6, that she comes from a good lineage. And so I'm going to try to speed up a little bit because of the time. That she comes from a good lineage. And what this means is, the ulama, they say, like the hadith of Abu Hurairah again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a woman is married for her lineage or her status. Her hasabiha, yani what's her lineage or her status. So the ulama, they say, like Ibn Hajar, the word lineage here means honorable origin. And it's taken from the word hisab. Because the Arabs, in order to show status, they would enumerate, count. As the word hisab means counting or calculating, they would count their forefathers in front of another person to show their status. Like my father is so-and-so, and so father is so-and-so, father is so-and-so. And they would do this to show the person, look how much honorable people in my family. So what does it mean? It means status and lineage. So the scholars, they mention, some of them, that a woman of high status and lineage it's good to marry her if possible. Obviously, its weight in terms of prioritization in our cultures is not very high, but in some cultures it is. So if that's a concern, that someone should factor in. But the Shafi'i and the Hanabila, interestingly, they connect this to another topic, which is connected to lineage is also relatives. Is it recommended to marry your relative? The ulama, they actually discuss this. And the Shafi'i and the Hanabila, the madhab of the Imam Shafi'i and the madhab of Imam Ahmed, they held the view that it is disliked. Amongst other madhab, they say it's disliked to marry a qariba, to marry a relative. Surprisingly. Why? Because they're saying this union often leads to the children being born with birth defects. However, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen explains, rahimahullah, that it's possible that what's intended here, like why they would dislike it, some of the scholars, is that if there's a relative, someone is married to the relative, and when I say relative, I'm not talking about maharim, a'udhu billah, it's not allowed to marry the blood relatives like that, like your brothers and sisters, etc. We're talking about like cousins and distant more than that. Because if there's a mashakil, he says, there's mashakil between them, marital problems, it will not only lead to them damaging their own relationship, but also damaging the family and kinship ties, because they're family. So he says, based on that, some of them said that it's better that she be further from proximity, so that the woman be ajnabiyya, to be a stranger to him. But as we can conclude from both opinions, that in reality, marrying someone's cousin or distant cousin and etc. is not haram in Islam. It's not. Marrying the cousin, etc. is not haram, because Nabi SAW and the Sahaba, they did this. So this is something which you can find on my blog, Dar Safi, a small article and post on this discussion about marrying the cousins, because some people, they have a hard time understanding what about the concern of birth defects. Marrying them one-off doesn't harm, but continuous inbreeding, then yes, this is problematic, and this is what the ulama are intending. But is it the case that if someone has a relative, i.e. a cousin or distant cousin, who's practicing, his appearance is good for them, their religion is good for them, that they shouldn't marry a stranger? Shaykh Uthaymeen says no. As you can see, that the conditions that we all go back to, the bottom line is your religion. So this point is that it's a consideration for some cultures. In the Arab culture, in the time of the Rasul ﷺ, it was very important for them the lineage, and some cultures till today it is. So if it is, somebody should factor that in, but obviously it should never come before the religion or the akhlaq and the likes. Number 7, that a woman be fertile or childbearing. And this is based on a hadith from Ma'qal ibn Yasar, that Rasul ﷺ said that he said, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, I have found a woman of rank and beauty, but she does not give birth, O Messenger of Allah. Should I marry her? And he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, no. And he came again and asked, Rasulullah said no. And he asked again, he said no, the third time. And then the Nabi Sallallahu explained why, saying, marry women who are loving and very prolific, for I shall outnumber the other ummah by way of you. Hadith Sahih Sunan Abi Dawud 2050. This hadith shows recommendation to marry a woman who is childbearing. Now the wisdom behind this is, as the hadith says, so that we can have a bigger ummah. And the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam encouraging this. But is it haram to marry a woman who is barren, or is known not to have children, or she found that reality after? No, it's not haram, and there's no prohibition. So it's only recommendation. And someone may ask the question, how do we know then a woman is barren or not? Because that would come later after, right? They try to have children, they would find out. So some of the scholars say that a husband should look to the family. The family. Imam al-Azim al-Badi in Awn al-Ma'bud, volume 6, page 33, he says, we learn that a woman has these two qualities. We will learn a woman has the qualities of being loving and prolific by way of her relatives, because the relatives, like her sister, her mother, her aunt, etc., relatives usually follow one another in nature, i.e. in the way that they are. And this is the same point Shaykh Abdul Muhsin Abbad Hafidullah said the same in his Sharh Sunan Abi Dawud, tape number 236. Now comes an interesting benefit. Is it allowed for someone, a husband or potential husband, like a groom, to ask a potential wife to do a medical test to find out if she's childbearing or not? Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, they asked him this question in his Sharh Bulugh al-Maram, Kitab al-Nikah, tape 2, and he said, no, you don't do this. Rather, just to see her relatives. If they have, for example, her mother had many children, or her aunts have many children, or at least they have children, then that's a sign, inshallah, she would as well. But to ask them to go through medical testing, that's invasive, and obviously, I don't think anyone would do that. Tayyib. Number 8, that the woman should be loving. And this is based on the last hadith I read. Marry women who are loving. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Wuludul Wudud, one who is loving and prolific. So loving means a woman who is tender and kind. She loves her husband and she is tender and kind and loves children, or is loving to children. And this is based on the same thing as I mentioned earlier, that a man will look to his relatives. How is her mother, how is her relatives? Are they kind to one another? Are they nice to one another? And this will give the person an indication of whether or not that they are suitable, right, to marry. Now the ulama, in explaining this as well, they mentioned another hadith, in Sahihah, hadith 1850. And in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that the best of women are those who are loving and prolific. And then the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentioned a few qualities, al-muwasiyah, al-muwatiyah. And he says another two qualities, a woman who is agreeable or tolerant, and a woman who she is cooperative. And then he says, who fears Allah. And the worst of women are the women who are going out, who leave their house exposing their charms and beauty, i.e. to other than their husbands, who walk with arrogance, who are hypocrites. Those of them will enter Jannah, or will enter Jannah just as rare as the red-beaked and red-legged crows. Now this hadith is very powerful to warn against, right, women doing any form of tabarruj, because the Quran prohibits that and Islam prohibits that. That's why we have hijab. But I won't focus on the beginning. The beginning says a woman who is loving and prolific. And we said you can see the household she's coming from, how our family are, and how she is to them. But then the two other qualities Rasulullah added there. And this is important. Before I get to those qualities, a loving wife, why is it important? Because she'll be loving to the husband, which is very important, because you want to have love between one another, that's husband and wife, and the kids. Hadith Bukhari and Muslim, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the best women who ride camels are the pious women from Quraysh. They treat their children with affection. Very important, affection, and keep a strict watch on the wealth of their spouses. So here Rasulullah is praising them for being loving. So very important quality. But what about the last part, the first part of the hadith I read earlier? That a woman is tolerant, or he used the word al-muwasiyah and al-muwatiyah. Here, Imam al-Munawi says it means a wife is agreeable to her husband. It's very important that a wife, that obviously it doesn't mean that she has to not have her own opinions. It doesn't negate that she can advise him and she can discuss things with him. But she's a person whose nature is agreeability. And that's actually a very important quality for women, which in today's society, due to the feminism, women are becoming more and more unagreeable. And this is not a quality that is attractive. But here's what's even more interesting. Imam Ismail ibn Muhammad Asbahani, died 535 Hijri, Qawwam al-Sunnah, his nickname was. In his Kitab al-Targhib al-Tarhib, volume 2, page 251, he says, al-Mawasiyah, it means agreeability to her husband. Al-Mawatiyah, cooperative in helping her husband. So that's an additional quality if you want to add. So if that was 8, this could be 9, if you wanted to do that. That a woman should try her best to be a woman or a person who's generally more agreeable. Of course, now when something's haram, then you have to stand up and say something. Or if you want to differ, you disagree with etiquette. And this also is a quality that is good in Islam for husbands as well. To be people who, yes, to be assertive, but also to be respectful. And it's interesting, the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned this quality. Wallahu musta'an. Number 10, because, so we'll make the last two, or the ones before we mentioned, as 9. So we mentioned now number 10 then. Since we mentioned 10, and this will end for the sisters, then we'll mention the brothers and we'll finish. Number 10, that a woman it's preferable that she comes from a family of wealth or she has wealth. Now this is very interesting because the hadith of Abu Hurairah I cited earlier again and again, it mentioned that a woman is generally married for her wealth. So somebody may ask the question, why would a husband look for a woman who has wealth? What exactly are they looking for? What exactly are they looking for by way of that wealth? So interesting, Hafiz Ibn Hajar fi Fath al-Bari, he says some scholars, okay, this is for the brothers, this is a weak opinion, okay, so we should not want to take this opinion. He says, Hafiz Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, the Malikiyya, they held the view, the Maliki scholars, that it's permissible. A man gets married to a woman for her money because it's allowed for him to take from his wife's money. And he can just benefit from it because that's one of the reasons why he gets married to her. But obviously we know this is wrong because the husband is supposed to provide for the woman and he can't take from wealth except with her permission. So that obviously is a wrong understanding. because it would necessitate the husband just marrying her for her money, and he doesn't have any money to take care of her. Ibn Hajar explains the real reason. He says what's more correct is that the reason why a man will marry a woman for her wealth is to ensure that their children, means her and his children, will inherit the money after her death if she passes away. So it leaves their children better off because of the rules of inheritance. Or that the wife will have more money. This is a good benefit, actually. Allahumma barak. He says, Ibn Hajar, or it will allow the woman to have her own money so that she might not have to ask her husband a lot, means often make frequent requests for things that women usually need or need to get. And if she has her own money, it'd be ease the burden for the husband. Because we know the financial responsibility is upon him, and the difficulty sometimes is there. And this is important. We'll talk about more in the coming lessons. So he says, or it could mean that he marries her for her money, and she willingly gives him the money from her own amazing qualities and benefit. All these are possibilities. Fath al-Bari, volume 9, page 38. So in case we read that hadith, now we know why. And I find it very interesting that he mentioned that. It can help her to buy what she needs. So usually women need, but more importantly, helps the husband in the financial burden, even though it's his responsibility to take care of the house. We do know the difficulty at times for him to provide for everything, so that could be a good sign. Again, it's not an excuse that he should not take care of her. That's still his obligation. We finished the lessons now with the qualities that a husband has, and we said there are 6, and I'll cover them quickly. So for the husband, the woman should look for the following qualities in a potential husband. Number 1, good religion. Same hadith of Abu Hurairah doesn't apply here, because there's another hadith of Abu Hurairah that says the husband should have good deen. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when someone whose religion and character you are pleased with proposes to you, then marry them or marry him. If you do not do so, then there will be a turmoil, fitna on the land and abounding discord. Sahih at-Tirmidhi. This hadith is very interesting because it shows Rasulullah mentioned 2 powerful qualities every woman should keep in the top of the list. The one who you're pleased with, his deen. Deenuhu khuluquh. His deen and his manners. His deen and his manners. So a woman is married for a good character, just like a man. But more than that, her man is married for his deen, just like a woman is. إِذَا خَطَبَ إِلَيْكُمْ مَنْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلَقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ. So here Rasulullah is encouraging us to do this. Now, why is the religion so important? Because it comes over all other things. All other things. And this to show you, and this is important for the sisters, to prefer the deen over everything. Because we said the man who is righteous, if he marries you for your righteousness, inshallah, he will bring khair, both of you will bring khair, but it's also good for the family because it's inshallah means for provision. But the person's religion is good, and he might not have the best appearance as others. He might not have, for example, the most wealth as others. By Allah, he is a higher status. And this comes in the hadith of Fatima bint Qais radiallahu ta'ala anha. When she came to Rasulullah, he encouraged her to marry Usama bin Zayd radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Usama bin Zayd was not the same level as the other suitors, who were like Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Abu Jahm, if I remember correctly, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He was not at their level in terms of their wealth or status like this. But his deen is very good. So Ibn Nawawi comments and says, this is a hadith Bukhari Muslim, this is a hadith Muslim now. As for the Prophet advising Fatima to marry Usama, i.e. Fatima bin Qais, that is due to his knowledge. Now, I want us to pay attention to his knowledge, religion, virtue, uprightness, honor of his merits. So Nabi Sallallahu advised her to marry him, but she disliked to marry him because, number 1, he was a free slave. He was a freed slave, so his status is not as high as others. And he had a very dark complexion. Unzur, look at this hadith. This is Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is Islam. To come to equalize and come to harmonize our community. That perhaps someone else has qualities that may be desirable. The deen. Rasulullah said, now it continues, so the Prophet repeated the advice to her and encouraged her to marry him due to what the Prophet knew the benefit of marrying Usama. Yeah, we know Usama Zayd, how much Rasulullah loved him and how much status he's in. And she finally did so because of that advice. This is Sharh Sahih Muslim, volume 3, page 694. So the deen of Usama Rasulullah, because of his pleased with his deen, he preferred her to marry him over Muawiyah and Abu Jahm. Here, Rasulullah in the above hadith says, if you reject a suitor, if a woman rejects a husband because for other than his deen, then it's going to be on the earth what? What's going to happen then? He said, alayhi salatu wasalam, إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوهُ إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوهُ إلا تفعلوا. If you don't do that, تكن فتنة في الأرض وفساد عريض. There's going to be tremendous fitna in the earth, turmoil and abounding discord and corruption. What does that mean? I want everyone to pay attention to these words. It's amazing. Imam Abdul Rahman al-Mubarak Furi, ulama Ahl Hind, died 1353 Hijri. He writes in Tuhfat al-Ahwadi, Sharh al-Tirmidhi, volume 4, page 173. He says, if you do not marry those who you are pleased with their religion and character, and instead you prefer those who merely, or instead you prefer to the desire to marry those solely for their lineage or status or beauty or wealth, then there will be great fitna. The fitna, because you did not marry the woman off except to one who has wealth and status. And perhaps, he says, because of that, many of your women will remain without husbands, or most men will not have women. And wallahi, today we live in that era where it's difficult for the man to get married. The families of the spouse, of the wife, i.e. the wali, they're being more critical, looking at the wealth and status. And he says, because of that, many of them will get married. And it may even lead to a lot of fornication. And perhaps the guardians will be touched with shame, trial, and corruption, and will lead to cutting off the lineage and reduction of righteousness and chastity. Because if only women marry high status and wealthy people who make a lot of money, then what's going to happen? A lot of men won't get married because they get denied, and a lot of women won't get married because they can't find those men, because maybe they already married off, they already got married, or maybe they are not where they are living. And so this is a great benefit to teach us that deen for both parties is important. Next quality for the husband, he should have a good character. The woman should prefer a man of good character, and the hadith for that is the hadith I just cited above. Rasulullah said good character, and that needs to be investigated. Many women, as Shaykh Ibn mentioned earlier, as I cited, they get duped. They may marry a man who apparently looks righteous but is not. So they have to do their homework and be very diligent, asking questions. Because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was asked, and I'm going to get to it later, just a minute, when he was asked of Muawiyah about him and marrying him, he gave a reason as to why not. And when asked another, he gave a reason as to why not. Why? Because it's allowed. When someone asks you for marriage, you're allowed to tell the people the truth. You're allowed to tell the people the truth about what's their status and what they have good and what they're bad. Many times a man may be trying to get married, and the wife may not have asked around enough. Or she may have asked someone who's close to him and he lied. For the brothers, it's not permissible to lie about someone. You have to tell it as it is. There's no ghiba in this chapter. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself, he told us in that hadith about the negative or certain qualities of certain suitors. That's proof that's permissible, as we studied. So sometimes the woman doesn't ask enough and she gets deceived. Or she asks those who praise and don't say anything else. So doing the diligence of the character is very important, and not to be hasty, and we'll talk more about the next week about that. Number 3, it's good for the husband also to be childbearing. It means being potent. Because of the hadith earlier about having children. So she should be fertile, so should he. Because they're trying to have children, which the Rasul has encouraged. So same hadith as for him. Number 4, and this is an important one, that a woman should marry a husband who she deems to be attractive and good looking. And many sisters, they might have heard this or they hear this and not enough emphasis that in Islam, a woman is allowed to prefer and to put as part of her criterion a husband who she finds attractive. وَالدَّلِيلُ ذَلِكَ, and the hadith for that is the hadith of Thabit bin Qais' wife, radiyallahu ta'ala anha. When she came to Rasulullah and said, I don't blame Ya Rasulullah Thabit for his character or his religion, but I, being a Muslim, dislike to have an Islamic manner towards him. She asked for a khula', divorce. She initiated divorce from him, not because of his deen, because Thabit bin Qais is min Ahlul Jannah, kama qala Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. What was difficult for her was his appearance, and she was not attracted to him. Pay attention to this. This is a hadith. And so Rasulullah didn't criticize you. He said to, okay, give back the garden, which he is giving you as a mahar. You have to return back the mahar for khula', min shurut, and dissolve. The marriage was dissolved. Sheikh Faisal Hashidi from the Mashayikh of Yemen, he writes, this hadith, she disliked him due to his appearance. And she disliked because that she was not attracted to him, despite his good quality deen and his character, that it might lead to her falling short in relation to what's obligatory for him of good treatment and intimacy and the likes. And this is in his excellent book, very excellent book, Dif'ul Mashaa'ir, on page 59. This book of Shaykh Faisal Hashi, I advise all the brothers and sisters able to read it, The kitab is called Dif'ul Mashaa'ir, warming the feelings, and etiquette about marriage. Kitab is very good. And at the end I'm going to mention the books to go back to for the brothers and sisters to read more. So what we take from this, the ulama, this is important. The ulama, they say that it's a must for the wali not to marry off his daughter except to a woman who she sees to be attractive. Because beauty is an eye of the beholder, it's her. And this is important. And that's why in the Rasulullah, we'll see next week, encourage the spouses to look at one another. Now, the ulama, they mention this in their books. The fuqaha, they say that she has to be pleased with his look. It's not allowed for the wali to marry to one who's not attractive. They literally say this. As found in the Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya al-Kuwaitiyya, volume 41, page 231 to 232. To show you this, Hafid ibn Jawzi, rahimahullah, he writes, Imam ibn Jawzi, he died 597 Hijri. Ibn Jawzi writes, it's recommended for the one who wants to marry off his daughter to look for a young man who has good appearance, because a woman loves what a man loves, good looks. This is very important. Many times we don't hear these quotes. Because a woman loves what a man loves, i.e. good appearance. This is in his kitab, Ahkam al-Nisa, page 203. So no one can say a woman can't look for good looks. In fact, that's a must for her too. It's a two-way street. And it's natural. This is natural. Tayyib, number 5, which is, and we'll mention 5 and then 6. Number 5, that a husband have some wealth. Women may look for a husband who has wealth, and it's not haram. But as I mentioned earlier, it shouldn't be the sole cause of the marriage. So you cannot say, I'm only marrying wealthy people, or one who has a lot of money. Rather, we're going to see the prioritization in a minute. But is it wrong for her to give preference to the money? That he has some income, some ability to take care of her, some more. This is fine. وَدَلِيلُ ذَلِكَ حديث Fatima bin Qais, I cited it to you earlier. In there, Rasulullah when she said that Muawiyah proposed, and Abu Jahm, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, he says, as for Muawiyah, then he is poor, and he has not property at the moment. Means, Rasulullah mentioned that point to show that he's not suitable at the moment. Later, we know Muawiyah became the Khalifa, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, but at this moment, he wasn't. So now, somebody will say, but didn't you say earlier, brother, that a man can marry a wife if he's poor? Somebody will say, isn't that contradicting what you said earlier? No, it doesn't contradict. Because we said that it's allowed for a poor man to marry a woman, provided she knows that he's poor and she wants to marry him. But if a man married her woman and he had higher status, and all of a sudden he became poor, then she has the right to annul the marriage because that was a condition or something she wanted. Well, it's different. But if a husband comes, let's say a suitor, a potential husband, and he has nothing, if his deen is good and his khuluq is good, and the woman sees that she wants to marry him because he can find a way to make money, then we cannot say it's a condition. It's not a condition, but it's a preference. It's up to her. And I'm going to explain now. Sharh Sahih Muslim. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen in Sharh Sahih Muslim, Kitab al-Nudhur, tape 4, side A, he says, Rahimahullah, Ibn Uthaymeen, and this hadith is an encouragement, this hadith is an indication that from the means that encourage a marriage is that a woman marry or looks to marry a man, the man, who has money, so that they don't have any problems between them. Because he has to take care of her. So if he has no money, how is he going to take care of the sustenance, which is obligatory? Now somebody will say then, okay brother, what about then, if the man has no money, he could get a job, but he doesn't have a job. Can I reject him because he doesn't have a job? And this is a very important question that comes again and again. The husband came, or man came, his deen is good, his khuluq is good, his appearance is good, everything is good, but he has no money. Sometimes talib al-ilm, and tulab al-ilm, usually they don't have much. Hakada, that's the way it is. And this is the way of the Anbiya Rusul min qabl, alayhimus salam. They don't always have. So what's the situation here? Now, the woman, She has a choice up to her. Sheikh Abdul Muhsin Abbad was asked this very question in his Sharh Sunan al-Tirmidhi, Kitab al-Nikah, Kitab al-Nikah, tape 128. Sheikh was said, is it permissible for a woman to reject a man if he has no salaried job or no money? Like no job? Like nowadays, we know a job is a means. And he explained to Sheikh that if she's an older woman and she's looking for a husband, she shouldn't do this because perhaps the husband is good and is suitable for her. But if she's younger and she still has her life ahead of her, she can decide. It's no problem if she did that. It's up to her. But we have to ask a more critical question. Is it a condition that he gets married, he has a job? The answer is not a condition. What's a condition though is that he has a means to get money. And he has a plan. Because many times the husband may get married and he's still in school. Or he just recently graduated. Or he just recently got a job, but he's not making much. Patience with him. Dalil ذلك, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when he married Fatima radiyallahu ta'ala anha. That's the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ali did not have anything until Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Ali, give her something. He said, Ma indi shay, I have nothing. He said, give her your shield as a dowry. Give your shield as a mahar. And we mentioned in our seerah lessons a long time ago, in the 100 lines of poetry, Shaykh Salim al-Hilali, Hafidhullah, he mentions an authentic narration from Bayhaqi, the shield was only worth 4 dirham, around that price. Only 4 dirham, it was not worth much. But look, for Sahih Bukhari mentions Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu later when he got married to Fatima. I mean, he didn't have anything. He still had a place to stay, etc. He says in Sahih Bukhari, and we'll get the hadith later, that he went to work after marrying Fatima to go and get some money, selling some sweet smelling grass, in order to make money to pay for the walima. You see, Rasulullah married him and didn't have, but it didn't stop him from marrying because he has means. He went to work. So there's no harm then if someone came and he didn't have and say, I'm going to get. But obviously, is it advisable? Do we advise the brothers to do that? To come to the house of the wali and the woman and he has nothing? That's not advisable. Because it's not going to increase his chances, nor puts confidence. So rather he should come with something, and this is always better. Lastly, number 6, you should have knowledge of Quran and Sunnah. We spoke about this before, and it's also for the wife, but more for the husband because he's in charge of the household. He should know his deen, the basics of his deen, because he needs to command and he needs to advise and he needs to correct with adab, with ilm, with hikmah, but he needs to know the deen because he's going to be the one responsible. And many of the Salaf would look to their son-in-laws would be knowledgeable. And we mentioned in the beginning of this lessons, it's not befitting for the husband to get married without even knowledge. Both the husband and wife should be seeking knowledge prior. But what about the husband who's the head of the household and he doesn't know anything? How is he going to teach his wife? How is he going to correct his kids? How is he going to save himself? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nar. So obviously, it goes without saying, study and learn and be more responsible. And other qualities you can add, responsibility, you can add on top of the other things. But obviously, time is limited, but these are 6. Tayyib, somebody may ask the question now, brother, how do we categorize these? And I didn't mention the most important of all of these. Of course, not over the deen, but one of the most important X factors or qualities you have to consider is compatibility. And that's for next week, inshallah, because that's from the most important. Equivalency or compatibility, the ulama call it. How do you know if someone meets all these qualities? Are they compatible or not? Are they right for me or not? That is what ulama discuss a lot. And inshallah next week we'll discuss what does that mean, how do you go about it. But some ulama, they try to categorize the last bunch I just mentioned, all of these qualities, and they say, like, for example, everyone knows religion and character go first, but what goes second? Imam Ahmad rahimahullah held the view after religion and character is beauty. And then from there comes others. Because beauty goes with compatibility very much. Attraction. Imam al-Ramli from the Shafi'i scholars, he actually categorized them in the following order. He says first you look for religion, then intellect, then good manners, then if she's a virgin or not, then if she's fertile or childbearing or not, then beauty. Obviously, some of the brothers may not agree with this categorization. But ulama have different categorization. Religion, intellect, good manners, whether or not she's a virgin, childbearing, and beauty. This was his view. Again, the scholars have a different view. But prioritization, if you were to look clear at the evidence, religion. And with that comes after that character, then beauty, i.e. attractiveness, and then the rest. This is the best of them, all of them. And obviously if there's a contradiction between them, you do as Rasul said, فَاظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ, go for the one who has religion. May Allah cover you, or may your hand be covered in dust. طيب, inshallah, we've taken a long time here. We'll end with this, and we'll mention now 5 books. But some brothers, one of the sisters asked last week, what are some references, some good references that we can return to on this subject. I will mention the following. Number 1, Kitab Adab al-Zafaf. In English, these are all in English, alhamdulillah. Shaykh Al-Albani's book on marriage now is in English, alhamdulillah. So we should get that book, and it's available. Kitab Adab al-Zafaf. It's called now in English, I forget the full name, the etiquette of marriage, or marriage manual, something like this in English. It's in English. Just recently came out, Dar al-Sunnah print, the full book. This is one of the most important books because Shaykh Al-Albani wrote it to teach these issues, Al-Kitab al-Sunnah. Number 2, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen's excellent work, also in English. It's PDF. All of these are PDFs. It's called The Concise Manual on Marriage. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. It's in English. It's available online, again, or in print. Thirdly, Shaykh Salih Fawzan, hafidhullah. If you go to his Kitab Fiqh Summary, Al-Mulakhas Fiqhi, or Mulakhas Fiqhi, if you go there, he has a book on the Fiqh Summary, volume 1 and 2. If you go to the second volume, he has a chapter on marriage, very lengthy, chapter by chapter, very nice benefits and general overview of marriage. That's thirdly, available online again. Number 4, Kitab, explanation of Kitab al-Nikah from Bulugh al-Maram. The explanation of Kitab al-Nikah from Bulugh al-Maram. By who? Alamat Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. It's in English, print and PDF. So here some of the translators, they took the chapter of Nikah from Bulugh al-Maram with Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen's explanation, and they put it into English. Lastly, for the longest time, this book series has been one of the most prolific and still very helpful series, and that is the marriage series, written by Mustafa Jibali. In English, it is 4 books, and this book is really helpful. It starts with a green cover book which talks about how to get married and etiquette of marriage. Again, some PDF and print. Then he has another book about intimacy. Then he has a third book about rights of the husband and wife. And then a 4th book about child rearing. Till today in English, this is probably the most comprehensive English book series on marriage, and is very beneficial because all the hadith and the points are taken from the work of the ulama, especially the authentication and advice of Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, for he studied with, or he benefited greatly from Shaykh Al-Albani. So inshallah, with this much, I've extended quite a bit, I apologize. If anyone has any questions, we will take them. Otherwise, we'll take it next week, bi'idhnillah. Next week, we're going to talk about compatibility and etiquette of proposal. So once someone knows what to look for, now the next step is they go towards finding someone. And how do they do that? Out of Kitab al-Sunnah, that's what we're talking about. One last point. All these qualities I just mentioned, what's the point of them? The point of them is for a spouse to know what they're looking for, i.e. potential spouses. But also that they themselves embody these qualities before they get married. It's not allowed for someone to think that they want to get married and they don't have any idea what they're looking for. They should look and they should know and they should themselves prepare, because this is most important. Get yourself ready. And then go to look for someone. Because it's not correct to try to find someone who is perfect, or find someone who has the qualities you want, but you yourself are lacking in them. And lastly, for those who are already married, then all of this is an encouragement to embody those qualities within your relationship. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Any questions, inshallah, we'll take them. So the question says that who was that man who married a Kharijite? So I believe there's a post probably on Quran Da'wah. I believe. Wallahu a'lam. But his name was Imran bin Hitan. Hitan. So he was a man who was known prior to this marriage to be upon the deen. Imran bin Hitan. And then after that, Wallahu Allah musta'an, he did, as we mentioned, he married a Kharijite woman under this idea that he will guide her or help her, and she misguided him. Imran ibn Hitan. And his biography is there, Sir A'lam al-Nubala وغيره. طيب, anyone else have any questions? Otherwise we'll end. طيب, next week inshallah we'll go from the discussion of compatibility and also what practical steps someone can do to find a potential spouse, and then the process of courtship and marriage. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.